Hi, Smart News. A few stories to have on your radar as you start off a brand new week on some big topics like the economy, a major legal trial we're watching, a new study from the CDC, and some news when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines and children. So we'll have a sampling of a little bit of all of this. And let's start off first with the economy, because the economic stimulus bill that we've been talking so much about passed through the Senate this weekend. And so what you should know is that any legislation having to do with your money normally starts in the House of Representatives. It can be kicked to the Senate then for changes to be made, and then the Senate can kick it back to the House of Representatives for a final vote and passage before it goes to the President of the United States. And so this is where we are in this process right now. The House of Representatives is expected to take up the Senate's version of the bill early this week. The expectation is it will pass out of the House and head to the President's desk sometime over the next several days. Why does economic stimulus matter? The American consumer is responsible for 2/3 of economic activity in this country, and the United States is the largest economy in the world. So how you spend your money really matters. And there's always a lot of debate about stimulus, positives and negatives. The thinking of this right now from the White House is that economic stimulus is important because we're in an emergency situation. The faster economic stimulus can get into the economy, the shorter the economic recovery, which is better for everybody. Critics say the bill is just too big. It's not targeted enough. It actually has money for a lot of different special interests that have nothing to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. And they say there's other economic stimulus that has yet to make its way into the economy. But right now, it looks like this economic stimulus bill is moving quickly to the president's desk. If and when he signs it, it will be one of the largest economic stimulus packages ever signed. We had something similar in size last year by the previous administration. So that just gives you an idea of the historic nature of the times that we're in. One of the unknowns about economic stimulus, whoever passes it, is what people actually do with the money. They want you to take the money and push it back into the economy, but it's always unknown what consumers actually do when they get that money in their hands. So just something to keep in mind. Next, I'm going to take you from Washington, D.C. to Minnesota, where we're watching potentially the beginning of a trial of one of the former officers connected to the death of George Floyd. The officer that is facing the immediate trial is former police officer Derek Chauvin. He's charged with killing George Floyd, and he's facing several murder charges, including second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. There is a question about whether or not another charge could be added in this case, third-degree murder, which would give the jury a lesser murder charge to consider in addition to that second-degree murder charge. And that's a big question. If the judge does decide to include that third-degree murder charge, the trial that is expected to begin with jury selection on Monday could be delayed. So that's a big unknown. One thing you should know when we're talking about murder trials is that we tend to talk about first, second, third-degree murder like it's the same everywhere. And it's actually different depending on the state that you live in. In general, second and third-degree murder charges have to do with a crime that lacked premeditation. But we'll dig deeper into the actual allegations as we see the trial begin. We'll see if the trial does begin in earnest this week, and we'll have a better idea of the timeline moving forward. Finally, one of the big topics as of late has been some of the changing statewide mandates when it comes to COVID-19. And we got a brand new CDC study taking a look at statewide mask mandates and indoor dining between March and December of last year. And so in general, here's what this study shows, that there is almost an immediate association between statewide mask mandates and a decrease in COVID-19 cases. On the flip side, there is an association between indoor dining and an increase in COVID-19 cases within the first few weeks of opening. So the mask mandates seem to show an immediate effect. The indoor dining seem to show a little bit of a delayed effect. The CDC says in general, this is an association, not a cause and effect between some of these different policies, because there are variables. A lot of social mitigation guidelines go together. The CDC can't actually measure mask compliance. They can tell you which states have mandates, but they can't actually measure mask compliance. So there are some parts of flexibility in this data that you should know about. One thing that is a factor now is that we know between March and December of last year, many Americans didn't have access to COVID-19 vaccines, and there are many gaining access with each passing day. On vaccines, we're getting a little bit of news from Dr. Anthony Fauci, who said in an interview this weekend that he expects COVID-19 vaccines to be available to high school students sometime this fall and potentially elementary school children by early next year. There are some studies taking place right now in the early stages that are looking at COVID-19 vaccines in those 12 and older. Depending on how those studies go, we'll see younger kids involved in future studies. This is a hotly debated topic. I know that. I just want you to know that it's even being floated out there. There's a lot of debate to this. There are doctors who say that we cannot reach herd immunity without vaccinating kids. But there's also doctors that raise questions about whether or not herd immunity is possible with COVID-19. This was an interesting quote from one doctor to the Associated Press. He said, kids aren't just small adults. He was saying that their bodies are different, that there's a complexity to some of these trials as we get younger with the participants. So again, hotly debated topic. Just want you to know that that timeline is being floated for kids. And this is something that we're going to be watching. Speaking of controversial topics, I have never in the history of SmartHER News asked a more controversial question than I did today about whether or not you were interested in the Oprah interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Never more controversial in our existence as a company. Almost evenly divided. Okay, I don't see a lot of news items coming from the interview. One thing you should know, they told Oprah they're having a girl. That's all I'm telling you. We're talking about kids. Just wanted to make note. And then I look forward to your questions and comments about this story and many, many others. But hopefully this gets you started off and running on a brand new week. All right, questions and comments, let me know. And as always, more on smartnews.com.